Howdy mates, here's my second video log today while visiting the Mad River Gorge. So, I wanted to begin this video by just providing a beautiful view of just the snow and then the sun getting to the point of where it's getting ready to set. Probably in about another hour and a half. But that's not all I wanted to show in this video. I actually wanted to cover a certain topic that I have not covered before that much in my videos in the past. So, what I wanted to point out in this video is, well, what exactly are we looking at? Well, that green stuff is what I want to talk about. That is known as moss. It is basically an algae equivalent of being on land, whereas algae is in water. But as I came to learn, the type of moss that I believe we're looking at is called a cypress-leaved plate moss. And I will have to tell you, mosses are very tricky to identify because there are thousands of different species of mosses. And you probably figure in the state of Ohio alone, there's probably up to 30 different kinds. And they all look fairly similar to one another. But you may be wondering, like, okay, what's the big deal about moss? Well, to be frank, moss is actually one of the most important types of plants. Well, it's one of the most important types of seedless non-vascular plants, which basically means they produce by the means of spores, not seeds. And they usually get their source of nutrients right at the source. So they don't have any roots, nothing of the sort. And as it turns out, there are two different types of mosses that you can see. So, alright, the two types. So the first type is called the acrocarpus. And acrocarpus, the way how you can identify them is typically they like to form sort of a mat on wherever it is that they're settling on. And as you can see, the moss kind of looks like a little mat in a sense. But a key identification for an acrocarpus type of moss is if you look very closely, I don't know if this will be able to clear out for you guys. I wish it could. But typically, like an individual piece right here, it will usually, like the actual spore, it will come up, it will basically release off the tip of the individual piece of moss. And you can actually kind of see one right here. Yep. Quite amazing. And then the other type is known as plerocarpus, where usually the spores will release from the lateral part of an individual piece of moss. So it will kind of be like on the side. You can't really see it this time of the year because it is winter and there's really nothing blooming right now. But that is a key identification between an acrocarpus and a plerocarpus moss. So in this case, the sleeved plate moss is a great example of an acrocarpus. And you may also be wondering, like, okay, why should we care? Well, moss, as I did mention, is one of the most important types of plants because they actually help promote soil stabilization, and they are great at sequestering carbon, which in other words means they're able to hold it in at high amounts. And they also can serve as an excellent food source for some of the wildlife. And with their properties of allowing soil stabilization, they can reduce the amount of flooding that can happen in a certain area, especially like some that may be on the ground, which in this case it's actually on a piece of dolomite. But you have to figure with the properties of the moss and the fallen leaves, that is what has allowed like some of this soil to form on top of a rock. And that's what causes some of these trees to grow on these boulders. And these are relatively young trees. So you figure this big boulder would have fallen off this cliff thousands of years ago. But due to the properties of the moss, it has allowed soil to be stabilized and has allowed it to form over time. So, yeah, that was something else I wanted to share. Because I've covered moss a little, but I haven't really went further in depth with it. So I thought I would share that with you guys. I will provide a couple of articles so you guys can learn more about them. And I hope that you guys really learned something too in this video. Because even I did. Because frankly, mosses aren't really my specialty necessarily. But that's the amazing part about nature, is the learning never stops. So alright, hope all of you enjoy your Tuesday, and Journey on a Journey is out. Take care, folks.